The entire Spade arc was a lie. Everybody that was a part of the invasion of the Spade Kingdom had actually died several times, and these tragic events were altered and changed by the outside interference of one of Lucius, Gratis, and quite possibly ASTA'S, the Time Devil himself. While this seems hard to believe, there have been pieces of evidence scattered through this whole arc that suggest this very scenario. And so in this video, we'll be going over every significant event in this arc and see which events were changed or shifted to fit the narrative Lucius wanted. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of events that were changed, we first need to pinpoint where and or when these strange events began. And after going through the whole arc from the start of the invasion to the end, we found the exact moment we believed that time began being messed with. That moment happened towards the end of chapter 281. This is the moment when the demon god attacked the Clover Kingdom. In this chapter, we see Julius getting ready to battle the demon god with Kira's help. It stated that he needed Kira's scale magic to boost his power to match the demon. This seemed to be working at first, as Julius managed to age himself up to the age he was when the story began, even returning his full power as well. His power boost was limited and dependent on the time and mana he had saved up and the mana boost he gained thanks to Kira. However, as soon as he began to fight back against the demon god, Julius returned to his younger form, seemingly out of time. Julius is just as shocked as we all are at this moment, as he asks, "I'm out of time already? Why? It's too soon," implying that he had more time saved up to help protect the kingdom, even if it would be for a short time. But his surprise at the loss of the time he had accumulated, presumably over the last 6 months, is especially odd and telling. Where could all that time have gone, and why now? And at such a crucial time, no less. Well, the answer we came up with is that Lucius somehow managed to use the time Julius had saved up in order to exact a large-scale spell that would affect the time in the Spade Kingdom. Now, this is presumably 6 months worth of time we're talking about. If the time was used for a spell on the Spade Kingdom, then the events that occurred during the arc make a lot more sense. We've seen something like this back during the Elf arc when Julius fought against Patry. When Patry used a large spell that would have killed everyone in the Clover Kingdom, Julius stopped it by reversing time. Now, this spell took a lot of mana and concentration on Julius's part, which gave Patry the opportunity to defeat and seemingly kill Julius. So based on how much time could be reversed over a whole kingdom, it's not so hard to believe this could be happening in the Spade Kingdom and more frequently. How Lucius could do this while Julius was in control is still up in the air and could be a video for another time. Now, with that explanation, we can finally cover the famous clock tower. The idea of time being rewound in the hero's favor was actually brought upon by this clock tower in the invasion. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could a clock tower confirm the manipulation of time? Well, we didn't know at first either until the reveal of Lucius and ASTA'S during chapter 331. Afterwards, we looked back through the arc and noticed something very interesting. Every time we see the clock tower in this arc, it's the same time, at roughly 6:36 or 6:37. It is then seen at 6:45 when Noelle and the Heart Kingdom reinforcements arrive, and it is around 7:38 during the battle against Lucifero when Yuno and Leona tag teamed him. Now, at first, we would assume that an hour passed through this arc. This large-scale battle clearly should have taken more than an hour. This is where the bizarre times on the clock come into play, as Tabata was very deliberate in showing us the clock so many times during this arc. And with the release of chapter 331, this seems more likely than not to be the case, as the clock, while destroyed, begins to tick forward, and the chapter title is, "And Time Starts to Move." These 2 points confirm that time has been messed with, but how many times did this happen, and how large were the changes? Well, we're gonna get into that right now. Also, we're gonna say the word time a lot in this video, you've been warned. Noelle and the Heart Kingdom reinforcements. The first instance where we believe time had been altered was when Noelle arrived on the battlefield with the Heart Kingdom reinforcements. Now, before they arrived, the Clypot was opened earlier than expected, as it was revealed that Morris was blind and thus made him qualified to be a devil host, Lucifero's second host to be precise. Due to the boost in his own magic, thanks to his devil contract, Morris was able to accelerate the opening of the Clypot and even modify it so that Lucifero could manifest faster. Also, due to the modifications he made, a horde of low-ranking to mid-ranking devils began to flood out of the underworld. With imminent death heading to the Spade Kingdom freedom fighters and citizens, we are then greeted with a large beam of light, wiping out a sizable chunk of the devil horde. And that is when Noelle and her group, along with reinforcements from the Heart Kingdom, appear to save the day. And with their arrival, the group unleashed multiple true magic attacks, wiping out even more devils, clearly showing the strength they gained from training with the elves. But something to pay attention to is the clock in chapter 284. The clock is separated from the rest of the panel in the top left, showing the time to be 6:45. Why would Tabata go through the trouble of purposely singling out this image in its own little panel? Well, it was his own way of telling us that time in this arc isn't what it seems. If the time is correct, then that means about 10 minutes had passed since the start of the raid, which falls in line at first, as everything from breaking into the castle to the matchups against the Dark Triad should have only been a couple of minutes. Now let's jump really quick to when the arc ends. The time then is around 7:28, so that would mean Noelle's group arrived less than an hour before Lucifero was about to be revived, but time was altered to make it so that that when Noelle arrived to face Vonica, time had been reversed slightly. This would make it so that while Noelle and the others arrived late, the time of the area around them would be reversed to right after the Qliphoth fully opened. If this scenario is indeed true, then the original timeline setup would have had Noelle's group fight the Dark Triad, Morris, Nama, Lilith, as well as Lucifero and Megecula, all without the rest of the Black Bulls and ASTA'S help. This would lead to Noelle's forces losing brutally against overwhelming odds. The reason things played out well to begin with was because time was reset to a certain point so that Noelle and co would have help in the battle against Vonica and the other devils, and a few short minutes would be vital in the end, as the battle against Vonica and then Megecula should have lasted for a good while. If not for Noelle and later Mimosa, Charlotte and Rill would have definitely died at the hands of Vonica before Megecula would manifest. Without Noelle around, Rill wouldn't have time to recast his Twilight of Valhalla spell, which is what kept them from dying in that fight. This also would have led to Lolopechka dying, and Megecula would have fully manifested if not for Noelle. Not to mention the swift arrival of Asta and the Black Bulls later on, which truly swings the battle in the favor of our heroes. We'll get into the Black Bulls' role and how time was changed to fit their arrival in just a little bit. But before we go any further, if you haven't already, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. We're approaching 500,000 subscribers and need your help to get there. Now let's get into Asta's last minute saves. Next up, we have the instances where Asta makes a last minute save at the perfect time. There are 2 points in particular where this was the case, and we'll begin with the first and most crucial, and this would be when Asta saves Not from Mana and Lilith in chapter 287. This battle between the Supreme Devils and Vice Captain of the Black Bulls was insane, as Not pulls out all the stops and even resigns himself in order to die to kill his opponents. However, this pair was too much for him to defeat, as their ice and flame magic were so strong that he easily broke through every attempt he made. As Not prepares for death, Asta swoops in to defend his Vice Captain in a heroic entrance worthy of a shonen protagonist. Now, while this was badass and extremely hype, we now have another inconsistency with the timeline of events. As you remember from the start of this video, we had a demon god attack the Clover Kingdom, and Julius lost the time he had saved up out of nowhere. This led to a scenario where nobody in the area could stop the demon god, until Asta shows up revealing his devil Yuno form and turns the monster into a finely sliced cheese. Now, why did we mention this event? You see, the demon god appeared in the Clover Kingdom. It was implied that it appeared at the same time as the one that Mereoleona was fighting in the Spade Kingdom, which meant that Asta battled it during the opening minutes of the raid. With his devil Yuno form used up, Asta needed to recharge on the way to the Spade Kingdom. Even with the mobile hideout and Finra's portals, Asta wouldn't have gotten there in time, as it would have taken a good amount of time for him to cross across the intense magic zones separating the kingdoms. You could argue that Gimodelo, Not's devil, which he left behind to oversee Asta and Libe's training, could have used shadow magic to teleport them there. However, Gimodelo states it would be impossible to teleport such a large distance without Not, meaning that they have to book it the long way towards their destination, and that would definitely take a while. And if we take a look at the map of the world, it is a straight shot to the Spade Kingdom, but quite the distance. With this information, we could assume this trip at full speed and utilizing the powers of the Black Bull should have taken a little over an hour. Again, we're kind of lowballing it here, and this will lead them to arrive presumably after Noelle's group, as the time when they arrive and charge for the castle is 6:45. This would mean that time had been rewound at least twice as the Qliphoth opened. Once for the arrival of Noelle's group, and the second for Asta to rescue Not. The second rewind is what makes things interesting, as the evidence for this appears during the climax between the battle against the twin devils and Asta. As the combined version of these devils ready an attack to wipe out Asta in the kingdom, he uses his Demon Slayer sword to deflect the devil's attack and defeat it. But before Asta wins, we see in the same chapter, chapter 289, the clock tower says 6:36 once again. This is a whole 9 minutes before Noelle's group even arrives to the invasion, but based on the evidence we had before, Asta should have arrived afterwards. So why is this the case? Well, Asta arriving before Noelle's group makes her fight go more smoothly, as remember, Asta barely makes it in time to not only save Not, but also Lolopechka. If Asta actually arrived after Noelle like he was supposed to, then Not and Lolopechka would have died based on the timing of events. Not would have been dead as Noelle's group arrives, since Not's battle seems to happen before she even gets there, and Lolopechka would have died to help in Megecula's resurrection by the time Asta arrived. This would lead to presumably everyone fighting, Megecula dying, and Asta arriving as the devil won. Another piece of evidence that supports time reversing so Asta gets there before Noelle is the short amount of time it took for him to make it to her location. If we look back, as Not explains the location of the Triad, Vonica and Dante's locations, where Not was before, were a good distance away, though Asta and Not needed to take care of Dante before heading to Noelle, which took even more time. The events with Dante stalled the group for a bit, and it leads them to Noelle in the nick of time, cutting things pretty close. Since Asta's Demon Destroyer Sword's Casualty Breaker ability was the only thing that could have removed the curse from Lolopechka and saved her life. The early arrival of Asta managed to save lives and stop major disasters that would have led to the failure of the plan. It was imperative that Asta be in these two particular situations in order to use his anti-magic swords to deal with these specific problems. Even though time was reversed twice, this didn't just make things work out for Asta and Noelle. This made arguably one of, if not the best fight in the series happen. I'm talking of course about Dante vs Magna. Magna vs Dante. Now this is actually the shortest example in this video, but it's still very important. While Magna vs Dante was an amazing fight for showing just how much potential the magic system of Black Clover has, we have to think how this was a byproduct of time being messed with. Now as we just explained, time was reversed so that Asta and Ko arrived before Noelle to make use of his anti-magic to stop many worst case scenarios. But looking back to when Asta defeated the combined twin devils, we see Magna and Zora preparing to enter the battle. We can take this to mean that these two would have arrived at the same time or a bit after the rest of the Black Bulls, meaning that time didn't need to be reversed for Magna as the events played out in a favorable way. The reason for this being the case is that Asta needed 30 minutes to recharge before using Devil Union again. With him unable to use that form, battling Dante would have been very difficult and would have probably wasted more time. As we all remember, during the first encounter, Asta barely survived Dante using 50% of Lucifero's power. Even if Asta got stronger, Dante using 100% power would have been near impossible without Devil Union. With more time wasted from the potential fight, Asta would have been too late to save Lolopechka and Noelle wouldn't have gotten the chance to defeat Megecula. So Magna facing off against Dante was the better bet in the end, as it gave Asta more time afterwards to make his save. This might as well have been the most pivotal moment in the arc due to how much time Magna gave the others with his efforts. A theme that the next event where time was manipulated shares as well. Yuno and Langris versus Xenon. Another epic fight within this arc which develops Yuno and helps him unleash his true power. And that may sound a little bit cliche and forced, but it really is true. While this was great for many reasons, Yuno's victory wouldn't have been possible without time manipulation. This makes sense as it's the same situation we just talked about with Magna versus Dante. Due to time being reversed so that the Black Bulls arrived earlier than they should have, altered events in the favor of the heroes. Magna fighting Dante gave Asta extra time to recover and allowed him to make it to Noelle just in time to stop Lolopechka's death and Megecula's incarnation. Similar events happened with Yuno, but not in the same way. In the battle against Xenon, Yuno and Langris got beat pretty badly when Xenon made a contract to become a devil host, leading to Yuno being knocked unconscious while Langris was forced to protect him as long as possible. Now, Langris had no chance against Xenon on his own, but out of nowhere, Finral manages to save him in the nick of time. With Finral's arrival, we then have the tag team of these two brothers against the devilified Xenon. The battle seems to be going well, with the two even managing to enter Xenon's mana zone to land a direct hit on his heart. We then get Yuno regaining consciousness to witness the brothers' failure to defeat Xenon, as even their spatial magic couldn't destroy a devil's heart. Witnessing this gruesome and hopeless sight, Yuno laments the situation and begins to think back on his decisions, as he wonders if he made the right choices in his life till now, and if he had done something different, things might have changed. But remembering the vow he made with Asta, his rival and brother, Yuno tries to get back up once more, stating that this wasn't all he was. Then, almost as if awakened, Yuno has a vision of a young boy who tells him, "I am you, but you have your own strength." As all of a sudden, a grimoire with the Spade Kingdom symbol appears in front of Yuno, as he now has two grimoires. This reveals that Yuno has star magic along with the wind magic he's had so far. This revelation and acquiring of new power allows Yuno to turn the tables on Xenon and eventually defeat him with a decisive blow, destroying the Devil Heart with his Saint Stage magic. The battle concludes with Yuno winning, but this wouldn't have been possible if Finral hadn't shown up when he did. Langris was very close to being killed by Xenon, and if he was, Yuno would have been killed without hesitation. It was only because of Finral's intervention that Yuno gained precious time to recover and even further his resolve, as he then realized his true self. The Spade Grimoire wouldn't have reached Yuno if he was still unconscious or if he hadn't seen the near-dead state Finral and Langris were in. These factors are what caused Yuno's awakening and steered the battle towards victory. And like Magna against Dante, this small intervention was just a result of time manipulation for the best possible outcome. Now you could argue that there was someone else to help Yuno out, but with Asta's group focusing on Dante and every other player preoccupied, Finral was the only one who was a good match for this fight. 2 spatial mages are better than 1, and they did put up a decent fight. Plus Langris is Finral's brother, so it makes sense why he would head to his location. So once again, the manipulation of time helped the right person get to where they needed to be at the right time, further pushing towards the final confrontation and the final instances of time being messed with. Incarnations of the King of Devils, Lucifero versus everyone. Okay, I know he doesn't technically fight everyone, but he fights practically all the captains along with Asta and Yuno, so I'm gonna count it as everyone. Anyway, it's time for the most recent and arguably biggest and consecutive example of time manipulation. Why do we believe this to be the case? Well, it's an all-out brawl against the King of Devils himself, as he basically steamrolls everyone in his way. But where in this massive battle was time altered? Well, that is simple. The first instance is when Lucifero initially demolishes the captains. Asta was beaten to near death by Lucifero previously, and the captains fought to protect him. Throughout this battle, we see captain after captain try and fail to even make Lucifero twitch. This is all to no avail, as he quickly defeats every captain except for Mario Leona. It's only after this where Yuno appears to save Asta before Lucifero could finish him off, and we then see the second to last image of the clock tower we've seen throughout this whole arc. The time at that moment was 7:28, which is very important as the time at the end of the arc was also 7:28. This meaning time was reversed again for this fight, and most likely a few times compared to previous decisive moments. Now, the moment where time was reversed first was when Asta not sneak attack failed. If we pay close attention in chapter 322, Lucifero looks in the direction of the clock tower and then notices Asta is missing. The clock tower appears to still be at 7:28, but his whole fight should have been a few minutes, meaning that this was the moment time changed. After the sneak attack failed, Not risked his life to save Asta and might have died less than a minute later, but Yami appears to save Not from the killing blow and makes his heroic entrance, emphasizing that if not for Yuno getting there when he did, Not and then Asta would have died there and then. We have another last minute save right after Yami when Zora and Nero team up to protect Asta from Lucifero. Now, this was another instance where Asta should have died, but with Nero and Zora's intervention, the worst was once again avoided. It's almost funny how many times these characters were about to die, only for someone to save them at the last second, almost as if time was being messed with. But jokes aside, let's jump to another pivotal moment in this matchup, and it is the moment at the end of chapter 325 where Asta's attack misses Lucifero, and Lucifero in retaliation seemingly breaks Asta's leg. I mention this as the next time we see Asta fight and move, his leg doesn't seem broken at all. We could chalk that up to adrenaline, but it doesn't change the fact that Asta shouldn't be standing, which means shortly after this moment, time was reversed in real time, making it so Asta's leg wasn't broken yet. We then head towards the finale of the battle when Asta unleashes his true Devil Union. As he quickly counters and slices up Lucifero, before the last slash and Devil Union was undone, we believe time was reversed for a brief second, so Lucifero's location was shifted slightly. This would lead to Asta missing the heart, failing to kill Lucifero. I mentioned this because we emphasized the union being undone during the second slash. I mean, it makes sense for how Asta missed the heart in the first place. So why did Lucius manipulate time? When Lucius was revealed along with the reveal of Astaroth no longer being in the underworld, everything clicked. With the power of Astaroth, Lucius was somehow able to manipulate time during the Spade invasion to reach a certain outcome. As you probably understand since we already broke down when the possible changes happened, but why? If Lucius was so powerful, couldn't he have dealt with Lucifero after the raid failed? Well, most likely not, and here's why. While Lucius has the time magic of Astaroth along with his own magic, which we still have no clue about, Lucifero would most likely be a bad matchup for him. From the fact of Lucifero's gravity and mana being so intense, it's possible that the magic would just be cancelled out by his gravity. As we all know, Rogue has the ability to alter fate for those close to the user, and just 60% of Lucifero's power completely disintegrated Rogue. When Lucifero manifests from the Qliphoth, we see Rogue being unraveled without even trying. You're probably thinking right now, yes, we know this already, what does this have to do with Lucius? Well, Lucius with Astaroth's time magic would either fight Lucifero to a standstill or get cancelled out by the sheer reality bending power of his gravity, meaning that Lucius needed to find a way to avoid any complications when confronting Lucifero, as the goal this whole time was to get Lucifero's heart, for reasons still unknown. But we can assume it would be for the dream of giving himself and humanity undying bodies. But it means nothing if he can't deal with Lucifero and get his heart. If time wasn't messed with, the events would have played out as intended, and Asta wouldn't have defeated Lucifero. All of this really puts the arc into perspective due to how big everyone's role were in the grand scheme of things, as well as how easily things could have, or in this case did, go wrong. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching to the end. Until next time, keep that plot armor on you. I'm KJ, have a great day, bye.